When did you kill the liveliest part of yourself? I remember the day laughter stopped. There was no scream, no cry, just a gentle silence, like a fine dust covering joy. It was an ordinary day, perhaps in a park, or maybe in the living room, under watchful eyes. Spontaneity, that vibrant flame that moved me, was slowly suffocated. Not with explicit violence, but with a, "that's not how you do it," a "be quiet," a "what will people think." Every reprimand was a shovelful of earth over the small voice that wanted to sing off-key. A repression of spontaneity that became my second nature. The image in the mirror began to change, showing a more contained face, less sparkle in the eyes, more caution in gestures. The child I was, that liveliest part, wasn't murdered with a single blow. It was a gentle death, daily, by gradual asphyxiation. A process of disintegration, slow and almost imperceptible, like watching a photograph slowly fade. The body learned to shrink, to become smaller, to occupy less space in the world so as not to bother. Because bothering was dangerous, it invited disapproval, disconnection. It was synonymous with rejection, with non-acceptance. And the price of acceptance was life, my most authentic life, buried deep. The first death of a child is when it learns not to be. Slowly, the child became an actor, a master of dissimulation. Every movement, every word, rehearsed for the invisible audience of acceptance. The smile molded itself to fit. The voice adjusted, losing its unique timbre. It was an early social trauma, etched onto the skin like an invisible tattoo. A deep, systemic wounding. The pain of not being accepted, of being different, transformed into the art of disappearing behind 1,000 masks. Childhood turned into a stage. And I, the protagonist of a play where the script was written by external gazes, by the silent judgment of others. Spontaneity was buried under empty applause, because that applause tasted bitterly of renunciation. A surrender of self for a fleeting moment of validation. It wasn't about being happy, but about not causing discomfort, about squeezing into boxes that suffocated me, slowly draining the air from my spirit. The true self was pruned, branch by branch, until it became a deformed bonsai. A miniature, distorted version of what it should have been, a skeleton of who I was meant to be, stripped bare of its vibrant life. This repression didn't come with shouts, but with silent disapproval, with the heavy weight of unspoken judgment, with subtle distancing, with the casual, "you're too loud." And so, I learned to be quiet, not to shine too brightly, not to feel too much, to numb the edges of my emotions, not to exist too much so as not to be a threat, to become a ghost in my own narrative. Approval bought with authenticity is the most expensive of prisons. I became my own jailer, the shadow keeper. That part of me that buried the free child, that extinguished the light to fit into the dark. It was a conscious, yet unconscious act of self-preservation. Identity grief is the landscape of my soul. An arid desert where memories of what I could have been turned into mocking mirages. A vast, empty expanse within. I didn't mourn the death of that child with tears, but with silence. A heavy silence that sank deep into my bones, chilling me from the inside out. It's the pain of a goodbye that was never uttered, of a self that was never fully lived. A silent, unacknowledged loss that lingers. Repression transformed into a subtle addiction, the compulsive need to control every impulse, every authentic expression, to avoid awakening the monster of disapproval, the judging eyes, the turning backs. The mask I wear now isn't a choice, it's a second skin. It fused with my face, becoming inseparable. Where spontaneity was surgically removed, leaving a gaping void. I was programmed to please, and I called it survival. A twisted logic that dictated my every move. The child I once was still hides under the bed of my memory, frightened by the darkness I myself created for it, a captive in its own past. And with every mirror I avoid, I see the reflection of the assassin, the one who, in the name of acceptance, silenced the liveliest part of myself. Grief for one's own identity is the wound the world does not see. That small self, once full of sparkle, was traded for a safe place, an empty space. The addiction to being nobody took hold, a constant flight from my own reflection. It's not about physically disappearing, but about diluting one's essence until becoming imperceptible, like a mirage fading into the desert air. Every time I fall silent, when I annul myself in an environment, I feel a dose of relief, a calm that washes over the chaos. It's the automatic mechanism, learned early, that repression of spontaneity is the key to survival, the ultimate act of self-preservation in a hostile world. The inner voice became a monochromatic whisper. Don't stand out, don't cause trouble, don't be yourself. A constant dull hum in the background of my thoughts. This compulsion to be small pulled me away from myself, transformed me into a diffuse shadow, a silhouette without defined contours, a ghost in my own body, haunting my own life. The early social trauma taught me that acceptance came with the price of my own annihilation, and the payment was made, installment by installment, in every stifled laugh, in every unsaid idea, a heavy toll paid in fragments of my soul. There's no substance to the pain I feel, only the ghostly lightness of what one doesn't allow oneself to feel. A hollow echo where emotion should reside, as if the very air were my addiction, the ability not to weigh, not to mark, not to fully exist. A strange, weightless freedom. The search for love became an invisible chain, binding the soul in a cycle of neediness. A cruel paradox, because the fear of non-acceptance, the terror of social abandonment, outweighed the yearning to simply be. To be accepted became synonymous with not being for oneself. Each time I silenced myself not to stand out, I buried a piece of my essence, not with flowers or rituals, but with silence, a barren soil for what was true within me. This repression of spontaneity created a void, a hollow space where innocent joy, unfiltered curiosity should have pulsed. An aching emptiness. The child I killed wasn't just a phase, it was a promise. The promise of a vibrant self that never had the chance to breathe freely. A future that withered before it bloomed. The memory of what never was became a phantom landscape, haunting every decision. Every no said to myself in order to say yes to the world. A constant, internal negotiation. The early social trauma taught me to distrust my own sparkle, to see authenticity as a flaw, a defect to be corrected, something to be meticulously hidden. And identity grief manifests in small gestures, a heavy sigh when no one sees, a silent exhale of unspoken sorrow, a lost gaze in the mirror that doesn't reflect the soul, a vacant stare. Life drains away like smoke, a ghost in a world that fails to see. Because my greatest work was my own invisibility, a masterpiece of self-erasure. The buried essence is the seed of a grief that never ends. I hear the echo of a farewell, not a goodbye to someone else, but a farewell to myself. A silent, internal parting. The voice of that child, once vibrant, now silenced, tries to scream, but it's muffled, trapped in some basement of memory. A desperate, unheard plea. Identity grief is a river flowing within, its murky waters carrying the fragments of what was lost. A continuous, internal current of sorrow. Early social trauma left invisible scars, marks of the battle to fit where I didn't belong. A map of old wounds. And the repression of spontaneity became a prison without bars, where the jailer is me, the architect of my own confinement. The provoking question echoes, when did you kill the liveliest part of yourself? For me, it was in small doses of denial, in daily acts of conformity, a gradual erosion of self. It was the exact moment the desire for acceptance outweighed the truth of my own being. A fatal trade-off. As Gabor Maté would say, trauma is not what happens to us, but what happens inside us in the absence of someone to share it with. And this pain, this gentle death, I kept it to myself. A heavy, solitary burden. I transformed myself into a book with ripped-out pages, a melody without a final note, an incomplete story. There is no answer for the unheard cry, only the somber acceptance that this is my story, my legacy of silences. If you also recognize the child you silenced, write in the comments, I give voice to my true self. Because setting yourself free is the only inheritance worth leaving.